Picture this, the vast plains of 1880s Colorado, where dreams are as fragile as morning frost and hope can shatter like glass against the harsh realities of frontier life. What would you do if life took away your deepest desire not once, but twice? Would you surrender to the silence, or would you find the courage to rebuild from the ashes of your broken heart? Today, I'm going to tell you the true story of Martha and Samuel Henderson, a tale that will remind you that sometimes our greatest victories come after our most devastating defeats. This is a story about loss, love, and the incredible power of never giving up on your dreams. But before we begin this emotional journey together, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss the stories we share on this channel. Stories that touch the soul and remind us of the strength of the human spirit. The Colorado wind carried more than dust across the Henderson Ranch that autumn morning of 1883. It carried the weight of unspoken grief, the echo of dreams that had been buried too deep in the frozen ground behind the small wooden house. Martha Henderson stood at the kitchen window, her calloused hands gripping a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. At 28, she looked older, the kind of aging that comes not from years, but from carrying burdens too heavy for any soul to bear alone. Her auburn hair, once vibrant and full of life, now hung in a simple braid down her back. The ranch stretched out before her, 200 acres of Colorado prairie that she and Samuel had claimed 5 years ago with nothing but hope and determination. But it was the silence that haunted Martha most. The terrible, crushing silence where children's laughter should have been. "Morning, Martha." Samuel's voice came from behind her, gentle as always, but she could hear the careful way he spoke, like a man walking on thin ice. She didn't turn around. "Coffee's on the stove," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency. At 32, he was still the strong, dependable cowboy she'd fallen in love with, but grief had carved new lines around his eyes and added silver to his dark hair. They had lost their first child, Thomas, in the winter of 1881. Martha had carried him for 8 months, but Thomas came into the world too early, too small, and left it before he could take his first breath. The second loss came just over a year later. Little Sarah had made it to full term, and for one beautiful moment, Martha had heard her cry. But within hours, their daughter had slipped away, leaving behind only a tiny grave next to her brother's, and a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the entire ranch. After Samuel disappeared into the barn, Martha walked to the small desk in the corner. Every morning for the past year, she performed her ritual of remembrance. She opened a leather-bound journal and wrote, October 15th, 1883. Thomas Samuel Henderson would have been 2 years old today. Sarah Elizabeth Henderson would have been 8 months old. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke through her reverie. Doc Williams rode up the path, his medical bag bouncing against his horse's flank. "Mrs. Henderson!" Doc Williams called out as he dismounted. He was a kind man in his 50s, with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "I was wondering if I might speak with you and Samuel about something." Samuel emerged from the barn, his face immediately tense with concern. They gathered in the kitchen, and Doc Williams accepted Martha's offer of coffee. "I'll get straight to the point," the doctor said. "The widow Morrison passed last week. Consumption finally took her. She left behind 2 children, a boy and a girl, 8 and 6 years old." Martha felt her breath catch. She knew the Morrison children, James with his serious eyes, and Lucy, all sunshine and freckles. "The church is trying to find them a home," Doc Williams continued. "These children need more than just a roof over their heads. They need a family." Samuel reached across the table and took Martha's hand. "Doctor, we appreciate you thinking of us, but Martha and we're not sure we're the right people for this." "With respect, Samuel," Doc Williams said, leaning forward, "I think you might be exactly the right people. Those children need parents who understand loss, who know how precious life is." After the doctor left, Martha and Samuel sat in their kitchen as the afternoon light faded. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Samuel stood and walked to the window. "Martha, what do you think?" Martha joined him, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine something other than silence filling their home. She thought about James's serious eyes and Lucy's infectious laughter. "I think," she said slowly, "that maybe it's time to stop waiting for our dreams to come back to us. Maybe it's time to go find new ones." Samuel turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw the first spark of hope she'd seen in 2 years. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Martha woke before sunrise, but for the first time in months she felt something other than dread at facing another day. Samuel was already up, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. "You've been thinking about it too," Martha said. "All night," Samuel admitted. "I keep seeing those children's faces. James trying to be brave, taking care of his little sister, Lucy, not understanding why her mama isn't coming back." "Samuel," Martha said quietly, "I'm scared." "So am I," he replied, taking her hand. "But I'm more scared of spending the rest of our lives wondering, what if?" They rode into town that afternoon. Copper Creek was a small settlement where everyone knew everyone else's business, but also where people looked out for each other when times got hard. They found the children in the churchyard, James pushing Lucy on a makeshift swing. The boy looked up as they approached, his dark eyes wary but polite. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," James said, helping his sister down. "Pastor Jenkins said you might come by." Lucy peeked out from behind her brother, her thumb in her mouth. She was smaller than Martha had remembered, with tangled blonde curls and a dress that had been mended several times. "Hello, James." "Hello, Lucy," Martha said, kneeling down to their eye level. "We wanted to talk to you about something important." "Are you going to take us away?" Lucy asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Well, that depends. How would you feel about coming to live on a ranch? There are horses and cattle and lots of room to run and play." James straightened his shoulders. "I can work," he said seriously. "I helped Mama with everything. I can take care of Lucy." Samuel knelt beside Martha. "Son, if you came to live with us, your job wouldn't be to work. Your job would be to be a kid, to go to school and play and help out because that's what families do." "Would we be a family?" Lucy asked, taking her thumb out of her mouth. Martha felt tears sting her eyes. "If you wanted to be, yes. We would be a family." The children looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings share. Finally, James nodded. "We don't have anywhere else to go," he said simply. "And Lucy likes horses." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. James sat up front with Samuel, asking questions about cattle and farming. Lucy snuggled against Martha's side, asking if they would really have their own room. "You'll each have your own room," Martha assured her, "but if you get scared at night, you can always come find us." When they reached the ranch, Martha watched the children's faces as they took in their new home. The house was modest but well built, with a wide front porch. The barn was sturdy and red, and the pastures stretched toward the mountains. "It's big," Lucy whispered, her eyes wide. "Big enough for all of us," Martha said, taking her hand. That evening, as Martha helped Lucy wash up for bed, the little girl looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mrs. Henderson," Lucy said, "are you going to be my mama now?" Martha's breath caught. She thought about Thomas and Sarah, about the children she would never hold. But then she looked at Lucy's hopeful face, and Martha felt something shift inside her chest. "If you want me to be," Martha said softly, "I would be honored to be your mama." Lucy threw her small arms around Martha's neck, and for the first time in 2 years, Martha felt complete. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the soft sounds of children sleeping down the hall, Samuel reached for her hand in the darkness. "Martha," he whispered, "I think we're going to be all right." "I think so too," she whispered back, and for the first time in 2 years, she truly meant it. Winter came early that year, blanketing the Henderson ranch in snow that sparkled like diamonds. But inside the farmhouse, warmth radiated from more than just the wood-burning stove. The sound of children's laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for too long. James had thrown himself into ranch life with determination. Every morning, he was up before dawn, helping Samuel with chores. He learned to milk cows, feed chickens, and mend fences with focused intensity. "You don't have to work so hard, son," Samuel told him one morning. "You're not earning your place here. You belong here because we want you here." James stopped walking and looked up at Samuel. "But what if I don't do enough? What if you decide you don't want us anymore?" Samuel knelt down in the snow. "James, do you see that mountain over there?" He pointed to the tallest peak. "That mountain isn't going anywhere, no matter what the weather does. That's how our love for you and Lucy is. It's not something you have to earn." Lucy had attached herself to Martha with fierce devotion. She followed Martha everywhere, to the chicken coop, to the garden, even to the outhouse. As weeks passed, Lucy began to venture further from Martha's side, discovering the joy of building snow forts with James and helping Samuel brush the horses. The first real test came in December, when Lucy woke up with a fever. Martha heard her crying and rushed to her room, finding the little girl burning up and calling for her mother. "Mama!" Lucy sobbed, reaching for Martha. "I want my mama!" They spent the night taking turns cooling Lucy's fever. Samuel rode out before dawn to fetch Doc Williams, who confirmed it was just a common childhood illness. But during those frightening hours, something shifted in their family. James stopped trying to be the man of the house and allowed himself to be a scared little boy. Lucy, in her fevered state, called Martha Mama without hesitation. When Lucy's fever finally broke on the 3rd day, she opened her eyes and smiled at Martha with perfect trust. "Mama," she said simply, as if she'd been calling her that all her life. Christmas that year was unlike any the Henderson ranch had ever seen. They spent weeks preparing, making decorations and baking cookies. Samuel carved wooden toys, a horse for Lucy and farm animals for James. On Christmas morning, as they sat around the small tree, Martha watched her family exchange gifts and felt profound gratitude. The room was filled with warmth and laughter and love. But it was that evening, after the children had gone to bed, that the moment came that would define their family forever. Samuel wrapped his arms around Martha from behind as she cleaned the kitchen. "Martha," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She turned in his arms, seeing tears in his eyes. "What is it?" Samuel took her hands in his. "When we lost Thomas and Sarah, I thought maybe we weren't meant to be parents. But watching you with James and Lucy, I realize now that we were always meant to be parents. Maybe not the way we originally planned, but in the way that mattered most." He dropped to his knees then, right there in their kitchen, his hat in his hands and tears streaming down his face. "Martha," he said, his voice breaking, "your dream of being a mother, it was always my dream too. And now your dream is our dream, our reality." They held each other on the kitchen floor, crying tears of grief for the children they'd lost and tears of joy for the children they'd found. That night, Martha found James sitting up in bed, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "I was thinking about Mama, about how she used to tell us that when people die, they become stars and watch over the people they love." Martha looked out at the brilliant night sky. "That's a beautiful thought." Do you think she knows we're happy? I think she's very proud of the brave, kind boy you've become. And I think she's grateful that you and Lucy have found a family who loves you." James nodded, then looked up at Martha. "Mama, thank you for choosing us." "Oh, sweetheart," Martha said, pulling him into a hug. "We didn't choose you. We found each other, and that's the most beautiful kind of family there is." Spring arrived at the Henderson Ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and the promise of new life. It had been 6 months since James and Lucy had come to live with them, and the children had settled into their new life with remarkable adaptability. James had grown taller and stronger, his serious demeanor softening as he learned to trust in the permanence of his new family. Lucy had blossomed like the wildflowers in Martha's garden, her laughter ringing across the ranch. But it was on a warm May morning, as Martha was hanging laundry, that she felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that made her drop the wet sheet she was holding. She stood perfectly still, one hand pressed to her abdomen, hardly daring to breathe. It had been over 2 years since she'd felt that sensation, the quickening that meant new life was growing inside her. That evening, after the children were in bed, Martha found Samuel on the front porch, watching the sunset. "Samuel," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. I think I might be with child." Samuel's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked terrified. "Are you sure?" "Not completely," Martha admitted. "But I feel the same way I did with Thomas and Sarah." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Martha, I won't lie to you. I'm scared. But whatever happens, we'll face it together, all of us." The next morning, they rode into town to see Doc Williams. The doctor confirmed what Martha already knew in her heart. "Congratulations," he said with a warm smile. "You're about 2 months along. The baby should arrive sometime in late December." That evening, they gathered the children in the living room to share the news. "In the winter, probably around Christmas time, you're going to have a new baby brother or sister," Martha told them. Lucy's eyes went wide. "A real baby." "A real baby," Martha confirmed. James was quiet for a moment. "Will you still love us the same?" he asked. Martha knelt down in front of him. "James, love isn't like a pie that gets smaller when you cut more pieces. Love grows bigger with each person you add to it." As the months passed, Martha's pregnancy progressed smoothly. James and Lucy threw themselves into preparing for the baby's arrival, helping sew tiny clothes and build a wooden cradle. But in November, Martha woke up with cramping and spotting. Terror gripped her heart as they rode through the snow to Doc Williams' office. "It's probably nothing," Doc Williams said after examining her, "but I want you on bed rest for the next few weeks." The weeks that followed were the longest of Martha's life. She lay in bed, feeling the baby move and praying constantly for its safety. Samuel barely left her side, and James and Lucy took turns keeping her company. December arrived with a blizzard. Martha was enormous now, the baby so active she could barely sleep. Doc Williams had declared that the danger had passed. And then, on Christmas Eve morning, as Martha was helping Lucy frost cookies, her water broke. The labor was long and difficult, but Martha drew strength from the sounds of her family around her. And then, just as the church bells were ringing midnight announcing Christmas Day, Martha's son came into the world with a lusty cry. "He's perfect," Doc Williams announced, placing the baby on Martha's chest. "Completely perfect." Martha looked down at her son and felt a joy so profound it took her breath away. He was beautiful, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in protest. James and Lucy were allowed in to meet their new brother, gathering around the bed with faces glowing with excitement. "What's his name?" Lucy asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Martha looked at Samuel, and they shared a moment of perfect understanding. "His name is Hope," Martha said softly. "Hope Samuel Henderson." As the sun rose on Christmas morning, Martha lay in bed with her newborn son, surrounded by her family. Samuel sat beside her, one arm around James and the other around Lucy. "You know," Samuel said quietly, "I used to think that dreams were fragile things that could be broken and lost forever. But I was wrong. Dreams aren't fragile at all. They're like seeds. Sometimes they get buried so deep you think they'll never grow. But if you're patient, if you keep faith, they find a way to bloom again." Martha smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Your dream is our dream," she whispered. "Our dream," Samuel agreed, kissing her forehead. "Our beautiful, perfect dream." Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside their home, warmth radiated from the love of a family built through loss and hope, through second chances and the courage to believe in new beginnings. And so, the Henderson family's story reminds us that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest sorrows. Martha and Samuel learned that love multiplies rather than divides, that families can be built in ways we never expected, and that hope is never truly lost. Sometimes it just takes a different form than we imagined. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for new beginnings. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier. Stories that remind us of the incredible strength of the human spirit and the power of never giving up on love. Until next time, remember, your dreams may take unexpected paths, but they're never truly lost. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right moment to bloom again.